Hey guys, I hope you're well and welcome to episode 169 of the Layton Fitness Podcast. So within this specific podcast, we'll be discussing, should you be using fat burners? So unfortunately, people are wasting so much money on the supplements because they assume that if they take this fat burner, they're going to achieve their dream physique, they're going to lose tens of pounds and start losing body fat effortlessly. But here's the cold, hard truth. No matter how many fat burners you consume, no matter what magic potions you consume, this is not going to override the fact that we must be creating a calorie deficit. That is the whole key to fat loss. So therefore, you must be burning more calories than you're consuming, otherwise you're not going to make any progress whatsoever. That should put into perspective what you should be focusing on. The calorie deficit is everything. No matter how many fat burners you're consuming, if you're not in that calorie deficit, if you're not creating that calorie deficit, you're not going to lose any body fat whatsoever. So here's what I suggest you should be focusing on. Within this podcast, I want to discuss exactly what you should be focusing on to achieve your fat loss goal. So firstly, again, you need to be within that calorie deficit, so burning more calories than you're consuming. You might be wondering, James, how do I know whether I'm in a calorie deficit or not? Well, the cold hard truth is, if you're not losing weight, if you're not losing body fat, that means you're not in a calorie deficit. So therefore, that means you need to be tracking your progress. You need to be tracking your weight on the scale. And the goal within the fat loss phase is to lose approximately 0.5 to 1% weight loss per week. And this will allow you to maintain as much muscle mass as possible in the fat loss phase. It's really important to note that we've got two objectives within the fat loss phase: to lose body fat and then also to maintain as much muscle mass as possible. And it's really that second objective that dictates how aggressive we are with the calorie deficit. So again, if you're too aggressive with the calorie deficit, i.e. you're focusing on more than 0.5 to 1% weight loss per week, you're going to start losing more weight. However, that means you're going to lose more muscle mass as well. So that's the only way you know whether you're in a deficit or not, is actually whether you're making progress or not. So therefore, if you're not losing weight, you're not in a calorie deficit, you need to make a change, and I'll discuss that shortly. The next thing to focus on is consuming sufficient protein. Protein's main role in the fat loss phase is to help preserve as much muscle mass as possible. Again, so when you do lose the weight, you're not losing muscle mass, you're losing body fat, glycogen, and water as opposed to muscle mass. And that's really important because for males and females, you want to achieve a physique that you're proud of. If you're just focused on weight loss and not focused on maintaining muscle mass, as a female, for example, you're just going to be stick thin. Same for a male. I presume as a female, you want to have well-developed glutes, defined legs, defined shoulders and arms, and that comes from focusing on trying to preserve as much muscle mass as possible in the fat loss phase. Similarly for males, again, you want to maintain as much muscle mass as possible to be as big and as lean as you possibly can. Now, the next thing to focus on is having weight training as the foundation of your routine. Similar to what I just mentioned, we must have weight training as a foundation to preserve as much muscle mass as possible within the fat loss phase. If you're just focusing on doing lots of cardio, focusing on just burning lots of calories, again, you're going to lose a lot of muscle mass within the fat loss phase. Now, here's the key next step. The key next step is to understand that fat loss plateaus are perfectly normal within any fat loss phase, and that's ultimately just your cue to either decrease calories or increase energy expenditure for more cardio. So going back to the point I mentioned earlier, if you're not losing weight, i.e. you're not within a calorie deficit, that means you've reached a plateau and you need to make a change. So you need to either decrease calories by approximately 10 to 15%, protein will stay constant, which will make the reduction from carbohydrates or fats, or a combination of both, it doesn't particularly matter. Or you can increase energy expenditure for more cardio. So you can add in an additional cardio session, or you could potentially increase the duration of your current cardio sessions as well. Now, the final point is just to appreciate you need to be tracking all this. You need to be tracking your weight to make sure you're actually within that calorie deficit. Ideally, measurements as well, body part measurements, body fat percentage if you have that available to you, photos as well. But in addition to that, tracking your food intake. And it sounds complex, but once you've done it for a period of time, it starts to become second nature. And the real goal for tracking isn't necessarily to be tracking for life, but it's worthwhile having a period where you do track, because the great thing about tracking, even just for a short period of time, you start to really build up an awareness of just how calorically dense certain foods are. So don't feel like you've got to be tracking for the rest of your life. If you do it for a period of time, at least a month, 6 weeks, for example, you'll start to develop a skill. And then when you stop tracking, you can ultimately look at foods and understand, okay, roughly how many calories are in each food. And then you can basically estimate what you're consuming each and every day to achieve your goal. So that's a really important point, because I think that a lot of people get overwhelmed with tracking. When I'm working with my coaching clients, all my clients do track, just because we want to guarantee progress. But in terms of yourselves listening to this, in terms of kind of long-term sustainability, you don't necessarily have to be tracking forever, but it's worth doing it for a month to 6 weeks, and then you will really develop this skill. So then when you're not actually tracking, you'll be able to kind of guesstimate and estimate how many calories you're consuming within each meal, how many calories you're consuming roughly within the day, and that's really going to serve you tremendously well going forward. So thank you very much for listening again. Fat burners, one of the biggest scams in the fitness industry today. Do not waste your money. Focus on what does count, which is creating that calorie deficit needed for fat loss. Thank you very much for listening. I'll look forward to speaking to you next week. If you're still yet to subscribe to the podcast, please do, so you don't miss an episode each and every week. And if you're still yet to download my free ebook, How to Set Up a Nutrition Plan, if you go to James Layton, Layton, fitness.co.uk, you'll see a tab at the top of the page called free ebook, and you can download that immediately. I look forward to speaking to you next week. Thank you very much.